Hey everyone, the channel is on its journey to reach the first 1,000 subscribers. A small milestone, but a truly meaningful one. If you enjoy the content, hit subscribe and let's cross this first milestone together. A great war between Tian and the Mulan people is imminent. Han Li, at the early Nascent Soul stage, wishes to refine the mysterious green flame into thunder pearls, is currently in seclusion. In the upcoming Great War, this item could become a sharp weapon for him against his enemies. Corpse-severing finger. How many days has your martial uncle Han been in seclusion? Luluo suddenly asked faintly. Reporting to Martial Uncle Han has been in his private chamber for over 2 months. Junior sister Song and I have been guarding outside the private chamber the whole time. Martial Uncle Han has never once come out. When your Martial Uncle Han went into seclusion, he did inform me. He said he needed to make some preparations for the upcoming Great War, and told us not to disturb his seclusion lightly. But now it seems the Mulan people have fully gathered their forces, and are starting to make their move. The higher-ups on our side have gathered for a meeting. Those cultivators all specifically requested that your Martial Uncle Han attend, but I've turned them all down with excuses. But now, the 3 great cultivators have all gathered in Tian City, and have also sent a letter, inviting your Martial Uncle Han to a meeting tomorrow. This time, it is a meeting that only mid-Nascent Soul stage cultivators are allowed to attend. This shows how much importance they place on your Martial Uncle Han. It's hard to push this off any longer. Moreover, I estimate that this gathering will be the final meeting to decide how to respond. If someone from our Luo Yun sect participates in the poetry meeting, there will be quite a few benefits. Leave Luo Tan murmured. Upon hearing this from LV Shaishu, the others in the hall also wore bitter smiles. However, Han Shaishu is definitely in seclusion right now, at such a critical moment. If we disturb him easily, will it expose our great uncle? A woman with the surname Song hesitated for a moment, and said with a hint of concern in her tone, "It is precisely because of this worrying that LV Shaishu has been procrastinating. But if Han Shaishu doesn't show up at tomorrow's gathering, I'm afraid the others." A middle-aged man with 2 patches of mustache on his lips said hesitantly, "What about the others?" Just then, a light and airy voice suddenly came from outside the hall. The voice was not loud, but it clearly reached everyone's ears. Upon hearing this, the rain suddenly brought a joyful expression to his face. With the sudden appearance of the voice, Han Li's figure appeared at the entrance of the hall. He walked in with a calm expression. "Junior brother Han, you finally came out of seclusion. That's wonderful." While others greeted Han Li, Luluo stood up with a beaming smile to welcome him. He did not fully attack. "I originally wanted to continue my seclusion. I was just a bit worried about the situation with the Mulan people, so I came out to take a look first. It seems that my timing to come out was indeed just right." Han Licking chuckled and said, "Heh heh, it seems junior brother also heard the recent discussions about a few negligent individuals. However, there are indeed quite a few people wanting to see you lately. Other matters are not important. But tomorrow, the 3 major sects will personally host a high-level meeting. Junior brother Han must go and take a look. After all, our Lu Yun sect is sending out a significant portion of our strength this time. I don't want our sect's disciples to suffer too much loss. Junior brother, listen to how those in charge are planning for this great battle. It will help senior brother have some assurance," Luluo said with a serious expression. "Since you are aware of this matter, you will definitely go to take a look tomorrow. I have long admired the 3 major modifiers. I am really looking forward to tomorrow's gathering." Han Li readily agreed to come. Han Li's response made Luluo very happy. Immediately, he chatted with Han Li about some events that had happened in the past 2 months. The mage has started sending people to attack the major formations at the borders. Upon hearing Luluo's words, Han Yu furrowed her brows and asked, "Actually, this was just a matter of 3 or 4 days ago. Although it didn't cause any casualties, it was a sign that the Mulan people were fully prepared." Luluo's smile faded. Chen Chung said, "If the Mulan people are almost ready, how are we doing with our personnel arrangements? It should be about ready to, right?" The carpenter in the group moved slightly, and slowly asked, "We are quite different from the Mulan people. Although the Mulan rituals are composed of various tribes, it's quite chaotic. But it's not like us in Tianan, with so many different sects. According to the characteristics of public law, we group based on the power of magical artifacts and even the level of cultivation. Our personnel arrangements are much more complicated than those of the Mulan people. Moreover, the Mulan people have been preparing for this invasion for a long time. We are indeed a bit late in our preparations. Fortunately, the 4 major factions are relatively of one mind this time, and by now, preparations are mostly complete. Even if the war were to break out right now, we would still have a fighting chance, Luluo explained. So, you're saying the Great War is truly imminent? Han Li rubbed his nose. He said with a somewhat grim expression. That's most likely correct. Otherwise, the three great cultivators wouldn't have gathered together so quickly and hastily called for tomorrow's meeting. The mid-Nascent Soul stage cultivators are the most powerful figures in our Tian region, Luluo sighed, and said with a sense of resignation. Listening to Han Li and Luluo, the discussion between these two fallen cloud sect elders, the other cultivators listening in had varied expressions. They all grew solemn. Then, Han Li suddenly changed the subject. He asked about the fallen cloud sect's recent arrangements for the disciples. Luluo and the others then proceeded to inform Han Li of everything in detail. When he heard that most of the fallen cloud sect disciples had been broken up and assigned to various cultivator squads, spending their days practicing coordinated battle tactics, Han Li simply nodded without saying anything. This kind of arrangement was actually quite normal. After all, this isn't some kind of duel between cultivators, where single combat is all that matters, no matter how powerful a cultivator is. If they are simultaneously attacked by thousands upon thousands of well-trained cultivators, they can only die on the spot, filled with regret. Of course, under normal circumstances, these high-level cultivators would not let themselves fall into such a dangerous situation. As long as they aren't trapped by an army of cultivators, these high-level cultivators can absolutely use large-scale divine abilities to slaughter low-level cultivators in droves. Therefore, having beings who can counterbalance the enemy's high-level cultivators is also a matter of utmost importance. And in the current war between the cultivators and the mages, the situation is much the same. The magical combat between high-level cultivators and the Mulan sages. If either side lacks the power to counterbalance the other, they've already lost before the fight even begins. So, while Han Li verbally asked about the Lu Yun sect, his mind was already pondering the three great cultivators of Tianan, the reason for the summons, and the true purpose for the mid-stage cultivators. I'm afraid that in this meeting, besides arranging the movements of the cultivator army, they will most likely also lay out some strategies to counter the Mulan Grand Sages specifically, Han Li thought to himself. He couldn't help but give a cold smile inwardly. This time, he spent 2 months. Not only did he clear the hydrogen flames from the Fingyan ship, he completely eradicated all of them. He also utilized the evil warding divine lightning to take the splashed hydrogen flames mixed with hydrogen essence and refine them into 7 or 8 lightning beads. As for the rest, the refining process failed. They dissipated on their own. Han Li, seeing this, couldn't help but smile wryly. This was indeed an excellent way to eliminate these cyan flames. After chatting with these people for a while longer, Han Li bid farewell and left the hall. He returned to the pavilion prepared especially for him, and began to conserve his energy and recuperate. These 2 months of working day and night to expel the splashing cyan flames, and then immediately refining the lightning beads, had truly exhausted him. Early the next morning, Han Li set out from the station, and calmly walked towards the central area. Soon after, he could faintly see a massive structure, because the entire Tianyi city was constructed as a temporary settlement. Even the great hall for the higher-ups of the 4 major factions, where they specifically gathered, was also quite ordinary, and even a bit crude, and other than being larger than the Yishi Hall of the Heavenly Tao Alliance, aside from being slightly taller, they were practically cast from the same mold. However, the cultivators guarding the gate were only at the core formation stage. The moment these people saw Han Li walking over, and scanned him with their spiritual sense, they immediately came forward to greet him. One of the core formation cultivators first performed a bow before, respectfully saying, "Esteemed senior, today's meeting can only be attended by seniors at the mid-Nascent Soul stage or above." "Senior, are you?" Before the other person could finish speaking, Han Li flicked his hand and tossed over a white jade slip. It was the invitation letter that was sent over yesterday. "So, it is Senior Han. This junior has been disrespectful. Please come in." The guard cultivator scanned the jade slip with his spiritual sense, and immediately said with a face full of apology. He then stepped aside, clearing the doorway. Han Li smiled faintly, just as he took 2 steps and was about to walk in. His expression suddenly changed. He froze and turned his head to look. On a street to the side, 2 people were slowly walking over, one in front of the other, a man and a woman. The man appeared to be only in his 20s. He was dressed in a magnificent brocade robe. His skin was fair, tender, and lustrous. His features were exceptionally beautiful. Every gesture he made was dashing and unrestrained, with an air of elegance. But from a bit closer, you would notice that in the flash of this young man's eyes, a look of world weariness would occasionally appear. Deep in the corners of his eyes, there were crow's feet that didn't match his appearance, faintly visible. As a result, it instantly made the person look more than 10 years older. But what was strange was, the first glance at this person would actually make others feel that he had an indescribable feminine and powdered aura, as if he were a woman disguised as a man. It was truly bizarre. The moment Hanli saw this man, his heart immediately grew heavy. This person was a mid-Nascent Soul stage cultivator. He must also be one of the people attending this meeting. Judging by his bewitching appearance, he was most likely a demonic cultivator. I just wonder which sect he belongs to. Hanli quickly pondered in his mind. His gaze shifted, landing half a step behind him. On a woman? Hanli was slightly taken aback. The woman is young and beautiful, dressed in a dazzling red gown. Her face is framed by delicate features. Her figure is graceful and enchanting. She looks captivating and alluring, full of endless charm. But when Hanli clearly saw the woman's face, she first showed a strange expression. Then, as the unusual colors faded, a faint bitter smile appeared. It turned out to be Dong Xuan'er. Now, without guessing, Hanli already knew. The seemingly youthful old monster in life must have been adorned by the first sect of the demonic path, the Hewan sect. After so many years without seeing her, Dong Xuan'er has also changed. In terms of cultivation, compared to this woman's not-so-good spiritual root talent, it was somewhat unexpected. Still standing in front of the shop, motionless, gazing, naturally drew the attention of those at the door. The simple decorations also looked towards the two. As a result, upon seeing this person, most of these decorators turned pale. One of them even nervously murmured, "I didn't expect the ancient demon of the Hewan sect to come as well." Upon hearing this, the ancient demon, Hanli suddenly recalled someone. It seemed that besides that old demon of Hewan, who was a latecomer, there was no other reason. There is also another quite famous old monster with the surname Gu. This person possesses an extraordinary natural talent. He has a body that is both yin and yang. He also cultivates the top-tier demonic techniques of the Hewan sect. He is skilled in the art of essence plundering. He calls himself Zhenren Yunlu, but others call him Old Devil Yunlu. It's unknown whether it's because of this old devil's cultivation technique, or if he is just naturally insatiably lustful. He often commits the nefarious act of forcible essence plundering. Whether they are handsome men or beautiful women, most of those he takes a fancy to are not spared. As a result, he has naturally offended many major sects, but his cultivation level is truly profound and unfathomable. He has always been very reclusive and elusive, and with the Hewan sect backing him, there is nothing others can do about him. Furthermore, this person is not one who kills. Once he has finished plundering his victims, he lets them go. The sects and elders of these victims can only do their best to conceal the truth. They have to hold their noses and accept what happened. However, this person's reputation in the Tian cultivation world is one that is truly feared by all. When those young cultivators hear his name, they all flee at the mere mention of it, and those who cannot escape are left trembling in fear. Their faces turn pale with fright, terrified of being chosen by him and suffering a cruel fate. Could this young man be that old monster? Although Hanli wasn't afraid of this person, he couldn't help but grumble inwardly, feeling quite uncomfortable. Coincidentally, that stunningly handsome young man also noticed Hanli standing in front of the store entrance. His eyes narrowed as he sized Hanli up from a distance. Suddenly, he broke into a smile, revealing a hint of seductive charm. Seeing this, a chill went down Hanli's spine. After forcing a smile in return, he didn't even look at Dong Xuan'er, or her shocked and disgusted expression upon seeing him. He just turned and strode into the great hall. An old monster like that, he had no intention of dealing with him whatsoever. What, you know that person? Your heart suddenly started beating much faster just now. The young man slowly looked toward the store entrance. Once he saw that Hanli was gone, the smile on his face suddenly vanished. He asked Dong Xuan'er, who was behind him, in a flat tone. That person is a former acquaintance I haven't seen in many years. Seeing him so suddenly just now, I was just a bit startled, that's all. Dong Xuan'er's expression was a little strange, but she replied calmly, an old acquaintance, a cultivator of his level, can actually attend today's gathering. And he looks so young. He must be the newly promoted, and now famous, elder of the Luo Yun sect. Speaking of which, this person's surname is also Han, and his name is exactly the same as that person you mentioned before. It couldn't be him, could it? Facing Dong Xuan'er's curt reply, old demon Yunlu surprisingly did not get angry. Instead, he asked with a calm expression. It seemed his relationship with Dong Xuan'er was unusual. When Dong Xuan'er heard the old demon's words, Her face turned slightly pale, but she remained silent, not uttering a single word. A glint flashed in old demon Yunlu's eyes. After a cold snort, he did not press the matter further, but a shadow of gloom flickered between his brows. When the old demon brought Dong Xuan'er to the hall's entrance, the Golden Core cultivators on duty were all extremely alert. Their gazes sharp, they only asked a question or two before quickly letting them pass. Of course, Dong Xuan'er was not permitted to enter. She could only be led by a cultivator to a side hall to rest for the time being. Meanwhile, not long after Han Li walked through the entrance, he saw the entryway to the main hall. He immediately quickened his pace and walked inside. The layout inside the great hall was very simple. Aside from the massive stone pillars, in the large open space in the middle, every several yards, stood an exceptionally exquisite wooden chair. There were about 16 or 17 of them in total, and on these chairs sat a scattered 7 or 8 cultivators with various expressions. Upon seeing Han Li enter, some gave him a cold glance, some acted as if they hadn't seen him, and others had their eyes closed in meditation. All of them were minding their own business, acting as if no one else was there. However, one person, upon seeing Han Li enter, revealed a friendly smile. He beckoned to Han Li and said, "Fellow Taoist Han, you've come out of seclusion. If you don't mind, please, sit here next to me." This person was none other than the host from the Heavenly Tao Alliance, Long Han of the Lu Anming sect. "Thank you, Brother Long." Han Li did not refuse. He sat down on a chair next to him. Then he briefly sized up the few people present, and sat there upright and silent. A moment later, the figure of old devil Yunlu also appeared at the entrance. The moment he saw everyone inside the hall, he walked to an empty spot with a dark chuckle, and sat down ostentatiously. Not far from where he sat, an old man in a blue robe happened to be sitting there. This man held a small, emerald-green flask in one hand, and a white jade wine cup in the other. He was acting as if no one else was there, pouring and drinking by himself. As soon as old demon Yunlu sat down near him, a scent of cosmetics immediately wafted over, causing the man who smelled it to glare at the old demon and secretly feel utterly disgusted. The old demon paid no mind at all to the old man's dissatisfaction. Instead, after his gaze flickered a few times, it landed on Han Li, who was seated diagonally opposite him. He began to size up Han Li with great interest once again. This time, it was Han Li's turn to feel restless. She frowned, and simply closed her eyes gently. Her face became completely expressionless, but in her mind, she began to ponder about the old demon and Dong Xuan'er's relationship. Back then, after Dong Xuan'er was taken by the Hewan sect's young master and snatched away, she joined the demonic sect. Although the old demon was infamous, he shouldn't be preying on a disciple from his own sect. There must be some other relationship between them. Otherwise, the old demon wouldn't have come to this gathering, nor would he have brought Dong Xuan'er with him. Just when Han Li was somewhat confused, people kept coming in one after another. These people were naturally all mid-stage modifications of Yuan Ying. Some of them knew those who arrived earlier, while others had quite a bit of enmity. In this way, greetings and sarcastic remarks would occasionally come to mind while in the Great Hall. At this time, the old demon Yunlu had shifted his gaze away from Han Li, but Han Li remained motionless, not lifting his eyelids at all. He felt that among the mid-stage modifications, he hardly recognized a few people, so there was naturally no need to greet anyone. "Sui Hun, fellow Taoist, I didn't expect you to come as well. I heard that fellow Taoist Juhun Migong has already cultivated to the transformation realm. Truly a cause for celebration. Zi Shai, Sui Hun." This greeting made Han Li's heart stir. He couldn't help but open his eyes. He saw a thin and peculiar old man in a cooking robe, and a black-robed cultivator in the shop was enthusiastically greeting the old man in the cooking robe. After a moment, he immediately walked over with a beaming smile. How come Han Taoist has met Sui Huns and Ren before? The dragon beside noticed Han Li's taste. With a smile, he asked if there was none. Han merely listened. Senior brother Cheng had mentioned this person. "I heard he has considerable abilities," Han Li said with an unchanged expression. She didn't mention that during her trip to the state of Yue, she had once killed a member of the soul-shattering sect. Heh, this is not surprising. I remember Elder Cheng had once crossed paths with this person, and suffered a bit of a setback. Naturally, he left a deep impression. However, there is now a statement from the Taoist. There's no need to stir up trouble again. But among the reasons, there is one person that it would be best for Han Taoist not to provoke. That person is one of the 3 major cultivators of Tian. Encountering him would also be quite a headache. Donghua smiled slightly and said in a guiding tone, "To make the 3 major cultivators have a headache, Such a person must exist. His eyebrows moved slightly, showing a bit of surprise. Of course, this person had once fought with Taoist Ziyang from the 3 major cultivators. Although he almost suffered severe injuries, he still managed to injure Taoist Ziyang lightly, and escaped. Therefore, this person is almost universally acknowledged. So this person is almost universally acknowledged. An existence just below the 3 great cultivators. It's just that this person has always been used to acting alone. Even during the Fashai invasion, whether he would show up for such a major event is another matter entirely. Otherwise, he would be a great asset. Longhan explained carefully. To be able to severely injure a late-stage Nascent Soul cultivator. This person is truly remarkable. I wonder which expert that is. He must be quite famous, right? Yet I do not know his name. He asked curiously. Fellow Taoist, you have certainly heard of this person. The name Old Devil Tian. Fellow Taoist Han should be very familiar with it. Right. Longhan said with a smile. Old Devil Tian. So, it's him. Indeed, his name has been as resounding as thunder for a long time. Han Li gave a bitter smile. He muttered to himself. His mind flashed back to when he pretended to be a low-level cultivator, and the events that happened in the Sacred Trees Forbidden Land. At that time, the spies from both the righteous and demonic paths were all exceptionally wary of Old Devil Tianhan. But among the Nascent Soul cultivators, I thought another powerhouse was supposed to be. The one second only to the 3 great cultivators. Right. Han Li blinked his eyes. He said with a playful smile, but Longhan heard him. He heard this but shook his head. Although Feng Bin and I have some supernatural abilities, but if we fight one-on-one, we would, 9 times out of 10, be no match for this person. Of course, if the 2 of us were to join forces, that would be another matter entirely, Longhan said with a serious expression. Han Li smiled upon hearing this. Just as he was about to say something more, he suddenly felt someone staring at him. The gaze was somewhat icy and gloomy. It seemed to carry ill intent. Han Li became highly vigilant, but his expression remained unchanged. He slightly turned his head and met the person's gaze. It was actually a stranger, an old man with a long beard, dressed in emerald green robes. When the old man saw Han Li looking over, a cold glint flashed in his eyes. He moved his gaze away expressionlessly, as if nothing had happened. But Han Li did not relax because of this. Instead, he stared at the man with the glint in his eyes for a good while. What? Fellow Taoist Han, you don't recognize this person? Longhan had naturally noticed. He chuckled softly. From Brother Long's tone. It seems I am supposed to know him. Han Li was rather puzzled. This person is Dong Xuan'er, the great elder of the Jade Forest sect. He holds the great authority of the Jade Forest sect. Although I have never had any dealings with this person, but I've heard that this person has a very good relationship with that Gu Shuangpu. They are almost like brothers. Yet you regard Gu Shuangpu as a spy for the Mulan people. This person was eliminated because there was sufficient evidence. There was nothing said. But there must be some dissatisfaction with you. Fellow Taoist, you should be more careful. Longhan reminded with deep meaning. Tan Li listened, rubbing her nose. She had a bitter smile on her face. Yet she kept thinking repeatedly. In just a short quarter of an hour, the chairs in the shop were almost completely filled with cultivators. It's actually quite funny to think about it. I don't know if it was intentional or unintentional. The demonic cultivators almost all sat on the right side of the main hall, while the Righteous Alliance cultivators occupied most of the left side of the main hall. It seems that only the Heavenly Tao Alliance and the 9 Nations Alliance cultivators were indifferent to this. They casually sat on either side. Among these cultivators, another acquaintance that Han Li recognized was also seated. It was the miner from Nihangzhai. He happened to sit on the demonic side. Seeing Han Li looking over, he smiled at her. Han Li naturally nodded in acknowledgement. At this moment, Longhan again conveyed to Han Li, identifying to other cultivators from the Heavenly Tao Alliance, a woman with a plain face, wearing simple, light makeup, an elderly man with a sorrowful expression. Han Li took a longer look at the 2 of them. He committed their faces to memory. At this moment, perhaps because the crowd had grown, the expressions of those present had instead become solemn. No one was making small talk anymore. All of them were coldly sizing up the others. Each and every one of these people was a top-tier existence who dominated a region of the Heavenly South. Now, they were all gathered here, whether they knew each other or not. All sorts of thoughts and schemes naturally began to surface. Among these people, Han Li was considered an exceptionally special existence, with the powerful divine sense of these old monsters, as Han Li was not intentionally concealing it. Almost at the same time their gazes swept over Han Li. They saw the depth of his cultivation. Naturally, they also knew who Han Li was. After all, Han Li's reputation had become quite illustrious over the past 6 months. It was impossible for these old eccentrics not to have heard a thing or two. Meanwhile, Han Li sat there with his eyelids lowered, ignoring everyone, projecting an air of meeting all changes by remaining unchanged. Just as the hall began to grow incredibly quiet, and even a bit tense, from a side chamber of the Great Hall, 3 people finally walked out one after another. The old eccentric Jew, who had been silently watching the others. Wait a moment. All eyes gathered on them. A burly man in a black robe, a green-haired elder, and a Taoist with a sword on his back. Han Li's expression was as usual, but his heart skipped a beat. These 3 were the 3 great cultivators. They were also, for over 1,000 years, the only 3 late-stage Nascent Soul cultivators in the entire Heavenly South. The others had various expressions, but most of them, just like Han Li, watched the 3 of them without a change in expression, quietly waiting for them to speak. The 3 of them slowly walked to the center of the Great Hall. They stopped side by side. Standing in the middle was a somewhat grim-looking man in a black robe. He spoke coldly. I believe there's no need to introduce who the 3 of us are. Even if someone doesn't recognize us, they should know us by now. This gathering is hosted by the 3 of us. Does anyone have any objections? The voice of the man in the black robe was chillingly cold. As soon as he finished speaking, an immense pressure silently emanated from him. Soon, a tremendous weight descended upon the entire hall. The cultivators present sensed the unfathomable fluctuations of spiritual energy and their expressions changed slightly. However, while Han Li was shocked by the man's powerful magic, she was also filled with surprise. Looking at the cold and sinister demonic aura around him, she was sure he was the old demon of the demon path, He Huan. But this old demon's appearance was indeed quite different from what she had imagined. Although he was said to be the elder of the He Huan sect, his techniques seemed more akin to the demonic arts of the ghost spirit sect. Han Li did not know that the elder of the He Huan sect throughout the ages was always referred to as the old demon He Huan. Although the man in the black robe practiced a technique, it was actually a demonic art that had little to do with the He Huan sect, but still had to bear the title of Old Devil Huan. At this time, after the others sensed the big man's terrifying power, although they felt a bit uncomfortable, they wouldn't be foolish enough to jump out and challenge the authority of the 3 great cultivators. For a moment, the entire Grand Hall was completely silent. It was considered a tacit agreement with Old Devil Huan's earlier words. All right, since there are no objections, let's cut the nonsense. In fact, there's no more time for nonsense. Just this morning, the Mulan people sent an envoy and delivered a letter of challenge. They said if we don't agree to their conditions, then in 7 days, there will be a battle to the death at the border. The large man in the black robe spoke expressionlessly of the letter of challenge. 7 days from now. What are the conditions? A commotion broke out among the cultivators. What was just said is true. This is the enemy's letter of challenge. Fellow Taoists, please take a look at it first. Then we can discuss our strategy. Although the great battle is a bit earlier than we expected, but with the divine abilities of everyone present, are we really going to be afraid of the Mulan people? The Taoist priest chuckled lightly and spoke with great composure, although his voice was not loud. But, as it entered the ears of everyone present, it was like a gentle breeze brushing across their faces, causing a sense of calm to instantly wash over everyone's hearts. They immediately became calm and composed. The other cultivators were inwardly startled. The commotion immediately subsided, but someone muttered in a low voice, "The Tajan sect's heart-calming art. It really is something special." Hearing these seemingly unconvinced words, the middle-aged Taoist priest acted as if he hadn't heard. He took out a brilliant red jade slip from within his robe. He casually tossed it to an elderly man in a gray robe opposite him, and said with a smile, "This is the letter of challenge from the Mulan people. Fellow Taoist, take a look first." After the old man composed himself, he silently held the jade slip and used his divine sense to scan the contents inside. His expression turned indifferent and gloomy. Then, with a cold face, he tossed the jade slip directly to the person beside him. That person caught the jade slip and also took a curious look with his divine sense. His expression turned grim as well, as the cultivators passed the challenge letter around one by one. Han Li, however, sized up the Taoist priest and the old man in the green robe. The Taoist priest was over 40 years old. His skin was crystal clear and fair. His features were refined and scholarly, giving people a very favorable impression at first sight. He must be Master Ziyang of the Tian sect from the Righteous Tao Alliance. As for that old man from the Green Mountain, he really looks too ordinary on the outside. Whether it's his clothing or his appearance and demeanor, there's nothing special about him at all. The only thing that caught Han Li's attention was that this old man actually had long nails on his index finger, and these nails looked exceptionally sharp. They were entirely purple-black, glimmering with a faint light. It was indeed quite eye-catching. This person is naturally the Grand Elder of the Nine Nations Alliance, Wei Waiyu. Wei Waiyu seemed to sense Han Li's gaze. He glanced at Han Li with a smile. After their eyes met, a hint of surprise appeared on his face. He even smiled at Han Li. Han Li awkwardly returned a smile, but in her heart, she couldn't help but think, if this person knew about her and Nangong Wan's situation, would he still be able to smile at her? Just at that moment, Long Han, who was beside her, had already finished reading the sword control technique handed to him. He threw it to Han Li with an ugly expression. Seeing that the people in front all had such expressions, Han Li became a bit curious, so she immediately calmed her mind and began to look at it intently. After half a moment, Han Li frowned and pulled out the divine stone. She silently handed the jade slip to another cultivator. Before long, the jade slip had been passed around to everyone. Every single person's expression turned grim. After the last had finished reading, a cold snort came from someone who could no longer bear it. Fellow Taoists, you have all read the letter of challenge. I wonder what your thoughts are. Supreme Being Ziyang of the Supreme Truth sect chuckled, asking with a wry smile, such audacity, telling us to cede half of the heavenly south to them. Do they really think they're guaranteed to defeat us? A man in a brocade robe with a gloomy expression said coldly, exactly. What do they mean by just cede a little land, and we can bury the hatchet? Do they think we don't know that the Mulan people are nothing but a pack of stray dogs right now? I'm afraid we don't even need to have a decisive battle with them. If we just drag this out, we can slowly wear them down to their deaths. Another old man, with a large head and big ears, said with a cunning look on his face, fellow Taoist Lu, what do you mean by that? Is it because your Thousand Illusion sect is located deep within the heavenly south that you can afford to ignore whether our sects live or die? Of course, the Thousand Illusion sect doesn't care about a war of attrition. But what about the foundations of our sects? A large, dark-skinned man sitting next to the portly elder said with a hostile expression, aren't I also thinking of what's best for everyone? If a sect is destroyed, it can be rebuilt. But once a person is dead, they cannot be brought back to life. That fat old man was not at all intimidated by the large man in black. After glancing at him, he said indifferently, HMPH. Easy for you to say. If our several kingdoms are the ones to be abandoned, we cultivators, why should we block the mage army for you of the demonic path? We might as well just move our entire sects to your Tianluo kingdom. That way, not a single person would have to die. Someone said coldly, that's enough. The matter of fighting a prolonged war was decided long ago. There is absolutely no need to discuss it again. What we need to do now is figure out how to deal with the Mulan people's mage army, not for you all to bicker amongst yourselves. The large man in the black robe's expression darkened upon hearing this. He suddenly spoke out and reprimanded them. When the three of them saw that it was this old devil, Hewan, who had spoken, although they were resentful in their hearts, they obediently shut their mouths. After all, in the cultivation world, strength is what truly matters. Actually, the dispute between you three fellow Taoists is completely unnecessary. We have already calculated this long ago. Given the momentum of the mage army coming at us with its full strength, fighting a prolonged war is simply impossible. If we do not concentrate the power of the entire Tian region, it is fundamentally impossible to stop the opponent's offensive even a little. Relying solely on the strength of a single sect or nation, I'm afraid it would collapse immediately upon contact. By that time, the strength consumed will most likely reflect back on ourselves. Therefore, this great battle must be fought. Moreover, we must severely weaken the Mulan people. There can be no thoughts of luck involved. At this point, the expression of the person also became serious. Upon hearing these words, the others whispered among themselves for a moment, before falling silent again. But what exactly are the Mulan people up to? Let's fight then. Why do they also have to engage in some kind of poison warfare first? And how dare they use such potent poison, with so many precious materials? Even a large sect or faction wouldn't be able to gather that many. Are you saying that the Mulan grassland lacks cultivation resources? The one from Mulan sect, Dongmen Tu, suddenly asked with a glint in his eyes. I actually know this. The Mulan grassland is indeed resource poor, but relatively speaking, the temporary mines and some commonly used materials have a relatively large production area. As for the French-style trees, there are indeed not many. However, when it comes to rare materials, the Mulan grassland has quite a few. In fact, there are even several types that are richer than our Tianan. To be able to produce so many materials, it's not that surprising. The other person seemed to know a great deal about the Mulan people. He spoke up and explained, So that's how it is. But are they really that confident that they will definitely win the gambling duels? Aside from late-stage cultivators, anyone else can participate. It's a gamble of 10 matches, and a life-or-death gamble at that. Do they think our cultivators are just pushovers? Dong Xuan'er said slowly, a thoughtful expression appearing on his face. Every person present was a shrewd and calculating veteran. They naturally knew that when the Mulan people proposed this gambling duel, there must be some trickery or a hidden scheme involved. They couldn't help but simultaneously ponder what was amiss. Han Li was also somewhat puzzled. The challenge letter he just read was very clear. This gambling duel would be held in front of both sides' formations. It would be impossible to use any underhanded tactics. Moreover, the participating cultivators would directly carry the precious materials being wagered onto the field. The winner of the match could then directly take the opponent's storage pouch. The only thing that was a bit strange was, the challenge letter stated very clearly that these 10 gambling duels must be held simultaneously. Moreover, the loser of the bet cannot escape. They can only die in battle on the spot. Therefore, the bet will be held within a closed spatial barrier. This barrier allows both sides to send people to arrange the proceedings. During the bet, they will also send people to supervise the operation of the formation, to prevent the opponent from doing any tricks. However, no matter what trajectory the Mulan people have, this seems to be a good opportunity for us as well. If we can eliminate a few high-level mages before the main army engages, it will definitely draw our attention. Humph, they must have paid quite a bit of attention to us. Humph, I'm afraid the Mulan people have the exact same idea as you. One person said hesitantly. Another person immediately retorted with a cold laugh. What is there to even think about? The Mulan people want a wagered battle, and we're just supposed to give them one. There's absolutely no need for that. In 7 days, we will proceed according to our own plan. There's no need to accept any wagered battle. This way, no matter what tricks the other side has, they will be foiled. These words were spoken by that elder from Nihongjai with the surname Kwang. He said disdainfully, unfortunately, while what fellow Taoist Kwang says is reasonable, we must participate in this wagered battle, and we absolutely must win. This cannot be. The master sighed. He said with a hint of resignation. What, master? What do you mean by that? We can't let the Mulan people lead us by the nose. Elder Kwang's brow furrowed. He said, somewhat displeased. Among the other old-timers, several had already nodded in agreement with his words. The three of us naturally understand the complexities of the situation. But earlier, when the Mulan people were attacking, they captured many cultivators. Most of them were fellow Taoists from the Nine Nations Alliance. But our various sects and factions also had support disciples among them, and many have also been captured. According to the messenger, this group numbers as many as 1,000 people. Master Ziyang said with a grim expression. What do you mean by that? If we don't accept the wagered duels, would they actually dare to kill the captives? If that's the case, aren't the Mulan people afraid we'll retaliate by other means? Elder Kwang Din was startled. He blurted out. The messenger didn't explicitly say anything about killing the captives, but he kept insisting it was an opportunity for us to rescue these cultivators through wagered duels. Besides wagering these materials, for every match, they've also added over 100 captured cultivators to the stakes. As long as we win, these people can be returned to us. Master Ziyang continued. Upon hearing this, the elders present looked at each other in dismay. At first listen, these 1,000 plus cultivators might not seem like a large number, and most of them are low-level cultivators with weak cultivation bases. It seems we don't have to be blackmailed by them at all. But, if anyone were to actually suggest not saving these people, they would immediately become a public enemy. You see, these cultivators themselves are not that important, but the families and the various sects, big and small, that they represent. But many of our comrades, especially since many of them are cultivators, were still captured by the Mulan people while delaying our mages' attack. If we don't rescue them, I'm afraid our army's morale will be crushed before the war even begins. The cultivators will feel utterly disheartened. Many will no longer fight with all their strength. I never thought these grassland barbarians would resort to such a cunning scheme. During their previous invasions, they rarely seemed to use strategies. But this time, their very first move is incredibly vicious. Even though we know it's a trap, we have no choice but to walk right into it. Long Han sighed, and said in agreement. As for Long Han's words, how could the others not understand? They all felt a great sense of helplessness in their hearts, and cursed the cunning of the Mulan people. It seems everyone understands now. We must accept this wagered duel, whether we like it or not. Regardless of what their intentions are, we must utterly defeat their mages in this duel. Otherwise, the blow to our morale will be immense. Besides, looking at the duel format they've proposed, it doesn't seem like they plan to cheat during the fight. They most likely have some other scheme in mind. So, the fellow cultivators who participate, there is no need to worry about suffering any hidden losses. If anything seems amiss, we will also intervene directly to stop this battle. Of course, since this is a battle to the death, whether you are willing to fight is entirely up to you. Fellow Taoists, the three of us will not force anyone to participate. After Dong Xuan'er's gaze swept across everyone in the hall, he said gravely. The moment the old eccentrics heard the word voluntary, they all sneered inwardly. In the end, they all remained silent, their gazes flickering. No one was a fool. Not to mention that this wagered battle was highly suspicious. Even if it were not, no one would be willing to fight to the death. After all, to have reached their current realms, each of them had endured several hundred years of arduous cultivation to finally get to where they were. How could they so easily risk their lives? He also wore a calm and indifferent expression. He had no intention of stepping forward, although he did not mind contributing to this great battle. It had to be on the condition that his life was not in danger. The last battle at Yellow Dragon Mountain had nearly cost him his life. He certainly did not want to experience that again. Seeing the expressions on everyone in the hall, old Devil Hewan's face darkened. He let out a cold snort. The snort was bone-chillingly cold. The expressions of the cultivators present changed slightly, but still, everyone remained silent. No one stood up to speak. What is this? The master shook his head upon seeing this. A hint of helplessness appeared on his face. Meanwhile, Wei Wei squinted his eyes, remaining silent. It was unclear what he was thinking. In such an awkward situation, Master Jiang did not let it continue. He spoke again. Before coming here, I discussed with the two fellow Taoists. This bet is indeed a bit dangerous. Therefore, if the participating cultivators win, all the precious materials won from the bet will belong to the 4 victorious Taoists. All belong to the 4 victorious friends. This somewhat compensates for the risks of this expedition. I wonder what you all think about this. Moreover, as far as I know, several fellow cultivators seem to be lacking a few rare materials in their cultivation. They can't seem to find them anywhere. The 3 of us have already collected some. We can also meet the needs of these fellow cultivators. As soon as Master Ziyang finished speaking, his gaze swept across the faces of a few people. Among them was actually Han Li. A hint of confusion arose in Han Li's heart. The other few were also not ordinary cultivators. They actually spoke like this. Looks of shock and doubt also flashed across their faces. Although tempting conditions had indeed been stated, most people were visibly moved by it. But for a moment, still no one stepped forward to offer to participate in the poison battle. But just at that moment, Wei Wuya, who had been silent the entire time, suddenly raised a hand and looked towards Reverend Zhu Hun at his side. His lips moved slightly a few times. He was actually sending a sound transmission. The expression of Reverend Zhu Hun, who had been standing with his head lowered, suddenly changed. A look of rare astonishment appeared on his face, followed by an expression of mixed surprise and joy. After hearing a few sentences, Reverend Zhu Hun's mouth opened and closed silently, as he actually began to discuss matters with Wei Wuya. A moment later, a hesitant look appeared on Reverend Zhu Hun's face. His expression was uncertain and fluctuating. At the same time, the large, black-robed man also sent a sound transmission to old demon Yunlu. This old demon, ever since arriving in the Great Hall, had maintained a completely nonchalant expression, but upon hearing it, after receiving the sound transmission from his sect's great elder, his brows immediately furrowed. His expression turned somewhat grim. It was unclear what the large man had told him. As long as you, senior, can keep your promise, what's the harm in me taking a risk this one time? Reverend Zhu Hun pondered for a moment. Upon hearing this, the other old monsters were stunned. But just then, the old demon from the original path also spoke up. Since fellow Taoist Xu Aihun is participating, I, lacking in talent, will also go for a visit. With so many rare materials, it would be a real pity to miss out, the old demon said with a cold smile. But there was a hint of anger between his brows. Seemingly filled with displeasure, the other cultivators exchanged glances. Although they didn't say anything, they were secretly astonished. Regardless of how the two were persuaded, it made the rest of the people feel uneasy. But it made the others feel quite uneasy. Indeed, the following 3 major modifications were discussed one by one with several people, in detail. As a result, after listening, most of them agreed to the exclusive trip, either happily or with concern. Only 2 people shook their heads coldly. They flatly rejected the matter. I haven't seen the kind eyes yet. Various thoughts rushed through my mind. But just then, The voice of Master Jiang reached Kier. Taoist Han. Fellow Taoist Han, I hear you've been going around collecting a lot of information. I have to wonder, though, if there's some discrimination involved.